Welcome to my channel. So today's discussion is a continuation of how to reduce the damage to an incoming starship from non-atmosphere into atmosphere. I'm not a rocket scientist, so don't expect me to have the answer. This is a discussion for those of you that are rocket scientists or scientists in general. I have some thoughts and I'm going to share them. So NASA created what's called ablative shielding, and that's where as an aircraft or a spaceship re-enters atmosphere, a layer of the surface burns off and ionizes and goes past the ship, and as the ship plummets to Earth, more of that layer burns off and gets stripped away. That's ablative shielding. And then there's the really cool stuff that is thermal shielding, and that has to do with high-tech aluminum oxides and things where they can reflect heat backwards really well, or they don't absorb heat through themselves. And there's refractory brick is how we do it on the surface of the planet for fireplaces and for forges. And forges can get up to temperatures that melt steel, and we use things like KO wool and stuff like that. And those are really well-known products, but they may not fit on a starship very well returning to Earth. For welders and soldering, we can use clays that reflect heat and do not allow heat to transfer very easily. And again, we're talking reentry. So we're talking high speed, lots of friction. We need substances that reduce the heat load and can burn away and do some really cool stuff. So underneath there's the air, then there's the shield, and then underneath the shield, and then there's the ship, and there's all the components of the ship. In the layers towards the center of the ship, we could have different layers of insulators to help keep heated plasma from going into the ship and causing the ship to explode. A couple of things that come to mind. We have ways to use ceramic paints that would reflect heat or stop heat from transferring in, and it'd take a while for the heat to transfer in through the ceramic paints. We have things like we have chemicals like borax that foam a little bit when they get really hot. We use it in blacksmithing for forge welding. We use it as a flux. Again, there's the materials and products like KO wool. There's the ceramic paints. There's heat, flame-resistant paints, which again gets back to the borax and chemicals similar to that. And then there's things like stainless steel, which reflect huge amounts of heat. And there's aluminum that dissipate heat. They can take heat and move it away from the area fairly quickly. And then it gets really, and these are layers. These are stacked layers, layer. And then we get to the idea of insulators working because air is a terrible transmitter of heat. So if you have a gap, an air gap, solid material, gap, solid material. It takes a lot of energy to transfer the heat to the other side. Okay? That doesn't necessarily work for infrared. Infrared can pass, that's why we use infrared heaters to heat solid objects instead of the air. But as far as air is concerned, air is a terrible transmitter of heat. It's really hard. It's mobile, and it's really hard to heat and maintain heat. So air gaps, little tiny microscopic air gaps, can have a grand effect. That's why insulators work on the planet. They can have a grand effect on stopping heat transfer. But we're talking superheated plasma from reentry. So it gets a little bit more crazy than that. So as the layers are successively moved from the outer side of the ship to the inner side of the ship, we can use cooling technology, radiators, to radiate the heat away from the planet side of the ship to the non-planet side of the ship. In other words, the side that's facing the atmosphere that's taking the abuse can have heat stripped away. Cooling, it'd have to be really fast. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is ideal, but that's why radiators work. Radiators take heat, they transfer heat to a place where it's cold, and the heat dissipates off, and then as the liquid gets cooled, it gets pumped back. Now, that might not work perfectly in this situation, but it's another step in the system to reduce superheated plasma from coming through and blowing up the ship. Okay. Now, those radiators would have to have really precisely designed tubing, and that tubing's normally radiators are soldered. Nothing we can do about that. This would have to be a solid winding of pipe without any solder joints because of superheated plasma melting solder joints. We don't want that. It can't be made out of plastic. It can't be made out of copper. It'd have to be stainless steel. It'd have to be something that can take the heat and then still dissipate the heat on the other side. So on the back of the ship, that the space side of the ship, not the planet side of the ship, there should be radiators dumping heat backwards. Now that might not be feasible for the starship. But it's just a point. We're trying to get some points forward. We need layers. And as the layers get deeper into the ship, they have to be more complicated. The layers on the front have to be simple. The layers on the back have to be complicated because the ablative shielding is gone. That stuff burns away. And then there's the super insulated tiles that stop heat transfer, but because there's little tiny micro gaps in them, because they have to expand, contract, and rotate and roll with the ship's geometry and the stretching and heating of the ship and cooling of the ship and torque and twist, and you start going down the list, the friction of going through the planet's surface, the shaking alone could destroy those tiles. But as it gets past the tiles, it's got to get more and more complicated. There's even fiber cloths that can be used to buffer heat. We use them in welding for spatter to not hit wooden surfaces and burn through the wooden surfaces. And we can take the 1/4-inch thick material, put it on our hand, and put a propane torch and melt a penny in our hand and not have the heat transfer to our hand. I've watched that one happen before, and it's nuts. I don't recommend doing it personally, but it's a sacrificial blanket. Then in the CPU world, they have cooling gels that they put between the CPU and the motherboard to keep the CPU cool and to reduce its heat resistance. And again, I believe those fall into the ceramic gels, ceramic coatings. For guys that are soldering, we use Cool Blue, which is a ceramic coating that stops heat transfer from one joint to another to keep us from melting joints we don't want to melt. And those can all be applied. Those chemicals can all be applied, and they're fairly safe. But then there's technologies that aren't talked about. And in one of my prior videos, I discussed having a technology where we polarize the materials on the ship to ionize or reflect the gases that are hitting the ship. And that means that we charge the hull of the ship, the exterior of the hull of the ship, to be like positive to positive and repel, not positive to negative and attract, but positive to positive and repel the the gases around us, if it's possible. I'm not saying it is. I don't know. I'm thinking about ionization and how like soap works in oil. And you drop a drop of Dawn soap in a pot of water with oil, and all the ionization effect is instantaneous, and all the oil moves out of the way of the soap. Maybe there's a possibility that we can ionize the hull of the ship to reflect the gases as we're entering the atmosphere. I don't know if that's possible. I'm just saying that that's theoretical. Maybe there's somebody that knows more about it, because we're dealing with carbon dioxide, xenon, argon, helium, hydrogen, water vapor, oxygen, you name the chemical that's in the atmosphere, and our ship is going through all those layers. And as it gets denser, we slow down more. We go from some crazy speed of reentry down to something that's not quite as crazy due to resistance. Now, as the ship is hitting more and more particles of atmosphere, a couple of things could happen. The ship could have, how do I want to describe this? The ship could change its geometry to be larger. Nobody's discussing that, but we're trying to create resistance and slow the ship down. So if the ship is coming in, right, and it's coming in and it has to change its geometry to the angle of attack, so that way the most of the ship is hitting the atmosphere without tumbling, right, and without nose diving, without burning up. This angle of attack that's happening as it's penetrating in, we could, if we looked at the ship sideways, we could cause the ship to grow slightly. And as we grow slightly, and if we could control the fall still with wings and things, as we grow just slightly, we increase the surface area of contact or drag with the atmosphere, which slows us down, which reduces the friction. And friction's what we're hitting a lot of friction. Now, in doing so, in opening up the ship or changing the geometry or putting out some type of wing system that really starts slowing down the ship, there has to be a propulsion pushing against the atmosphere that would work to help slow us down, because we can't get to heat. And everybody's talking about, oh, well, you only have so much fuel and so much weight and stuff, but you can't have your ship blow up either. So the concept that I have is one that probably won't work, but at least we put the idea out there. Somebody else gets the idea. They say that's not going to work, but that gives me a different idea. Maybe we can do this instead. So the idea is this: you take a volume of water. So the ship is, sorry, we're not trying to advertise for anybody. The ship is entering atmosphere, and there's this water, okay? And imagine this is on the micro scale, not the macro scale. This is micro. These are tiny little volumes of water. And it might be U's that go to another port, okay? And as the atmosphere is hitting it and causing this little nipple to melt, this water volatilizes and creates higher pressure. And as the pressure increases, it blows out the port and it creates a small jet. Now multiply that by 1,000 of these on the surface of the ship, and you may have an effect where water pressure itself, volatilizing and causing steam to go forward and push against the atmosphere, may actually have a propulsive effect that slows the ship down. Might not be reasonable, but we only need so much time from non-atmosphere into atmosphere before drag takes over and we can control the ship. We need to get past the point where we're melting the ship. So this is a temporary effect that slows us down enough to get through the resistance of falling through the atmosphere. These are layered effects, and then the ship could close back up And those ports don't do anything anymore because there's no more water in them. They've volatilized their water away, and the ship's becoming lighter as it's penetrating the atmosphere. That's a potential possibility. The reusability of that is still to be determined. I'm trying to keep the ship from exploding, so water might not be the best thing because it could volatilize into hydrogen and oxygen and catch fire. And it's possible that water may not be the chemical we want to use, but it still gives you the idea of the nozzle exploding off from plasma hitting it, and then a high volume of material gases exiting the tube and slowing the ship down just enough for that few seconds to get through the atmosphere down to somewhere where a parachute could be used, or an alternate way to slow the ship down could be used. That doesn't mean we use any of this. It just means that we have to think of the ideas of solving the problem. My ideas may be terrible. You may have better ideas. Put them in the comments below. Share this video with a friend. Go to a physicist and talk to them about it. Maybe you come up with something better than hull polarization or microjets, like the bottle of water, or using ablative plating, or using the ability to open up the ship slightly to exhaust these gases out, or to make the ship slightly larger so that way there's more resistance, slowing the ship down, changing the geometry of the ship. You may have a better idea. We need to discuss it. This is something that has to go into the discussion, and we need to take it to the college level, and we need to go beyond. We need to go into the private sector and have the private sector test it, and find out what works. So in the process, we have the ablative technology that's from NASA. We have heat shielding technology, which is designed out of the furnace technologies, and we have non-flammable systems for like paint and ceramics that would keep things from overheating as superheated plasma hit them. And those can all be tested on the surface of the planet. I mean, you can take steel and you can coat it with these surfaces and take a plasma cutter and cut through it and see what cuts and what doesn't. Plasma cutters cut through everything that's electrically conductive, or what can be burned out of the way with a plasma field. So superheated plasma can melt things that normally can't melt. Plasma cutters can cut through a lot of stuff. But first, it has to be electrically conductive typically. Again, can we change the chart? Can we change the charge on the ship? Can we use ceramic coatings? Can we use materials like stainless steel and aluminum as heat dissipation units? Can we use things like micro heat distribution units, coils of radiators that radiate? I mean, that would be a coil. It'd be pumping water like crazy, or glycerin or glycol or whatever you're going to be pumping to get to the heat dissipation unit, and then freeze that off, dump the heat out. It may not be fast enough, but anything would be benefit. Can we use things like microjets throughout the surface of the ship, and when they overheat, their little copper cap melts off and they expel their mass and slow the ship down? Can we use drag to our benefit? The more surface area that contacts, the more volume of mass in the atmosphere, the slower we're going to go. It's drag coefficient. Can we change the drag coefficient? Can we change the drag coefficient to reduce the heat load on the ship? Can we reduce the heat load through transfer? Can we reflect the heat load? Can we ionize the gases to reflect off? We've got to come up with stuff. There's got to be Not one person working on this, not two people working on this, but millions of people working on this. Somebody will come up with a pretty good idea. Another one is that a heat shield that's on the ship, as the ship passes through and the heat shield's being destroyed, eventually you're going to get through the atmosphere where the heat shield's necessary. Can we rotate the ship and dump the heat shield so when we land the ship, we can just install another heat shield that's in better shape or good shape to launch again? Is that a possibility? So sometimes the heat shield is just gone, ejected, and let's just put on another one, and let's keep going. What's the turnaround time on that? Is that reasonable? Is there a reasonable expectation of success for rotating the ship, dumping the heat shield because it's no longer necessary, and then having the ship come in and land in a way that is feasible? Again, as you lose mass in the ship, it's easier to control the ship's descent and to control the ship landing and reusability. Why aren't we talking about using hypersonic parachutes? Why aren't we talking about a device that can be ejected out of the ship, slow the ship down due to drag, parachuting out, keeping the ship from coming in too fast, ejecting the parachute? Parachutes are easy to build. Closing that hatch after the ejection, landing the ship, putting a new parachute pack in, putting a new heat shield pack on. Let's go. Is the ship in good enough condition to relaunch? Let's go. So can we get a heat shield, flip it, toss the heat shield, throw up hypersonic parachutes, slow down the craft, get to a point where the craft can stabilize its own reentry, dump the parachutes, set for reentry, use less fuel, come down, get set, put a new heat shield on, repack the new parachute system, test the systems for functionality, reload the ship with fuels, and send it again. Maybe that takes more than a few days. Right now, you have to build a whole new ship when one blows up. So what can we do that's not building a brand new ship? Now, that brings up, how many ships are you flying? How many are in circulation? And how many are in a repair bay getting repaired before launch again? So if you have, say, 10 ships, okay? We're going to do 10 because I've got 10 fingers, okay? Woo, 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 10 fingers. Okay, you launch one ship. You prep the next ship for launch. This ship is now launched. This ship is prepping to launch. You launch this ship, so you now have two ships out. You launch this ship returns. 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 Or you launch this ship, that ship returns. 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 And somewhere along there, you launch the next ship, and you're into a cycle where you're launching ships. Okay? It's kind of a crazy idea, but it's all in cycles. How do you get to a cycle where you have a ship up, doing work, a ship coming down, getting repaired, a ship going up, doing work, a ship coming down, being repaired? And how many of those ships do you have to have before you can cycle it? Can you do 5 a week? 5 a month? I don't know. Now it's down to number of rockets, number of ships, the crews to man them, the information to operate them, the fuels, all that stuff. That's all logistics. Is that a possibility? So once we've gotten the ship to be able to come down, re-enter, land, get stabilized, and we go into repair cycle for that ship, because repairing a ship is probably less expensive than building a whole new one from scratch, then we can go to the point where we have one in service or multiples in service ready for relaunch. We have ones that are launching, coming back for service. We create a whole industry around reservicing these ships with new heat shields, new pumps, whatever. You would have to get in technicians for welding. You'd have to get in technicians. All the fields of construction would be there. There'd be welders, plumbers, electricians, fabricators, X-ray technicians. You name the technician that has to deal with checking out the ship, they would be employed. That means your colleges would have to put out better employees, better people with better knowledge, more information, and we'd have to ramp that up with money. Now, if you have a better idea, post it in the comments below. If you think any of these ideas are worth something, give it a thumbs up. If you think these ideas are really, really worth something, share it with a friend, hopefully Elon Musk, or Jeff Bezos, or NASA. If you think any of the ideas are worthy of continuous conversation, then I want you to post a video and share it with me because I want to see your videos. How you do that is up to you. What you think is intelligent is also up to you. I need to know what people are thinking. I need to know if this is shared information. And I need to know if people are actually serious about getting off the planet. I have other videos in my feed where I explain why it's probably not a good idea to get off the planet. It's probably nearly impossible. But we have to talk about the impossibilities before we can make the impossible possible. So we have to talk about the impossibilities. And here we are talking about reentry and possibilities, but we're making things possible. Let's talk about it. Have a great day.